Hello world, Great Gates Pyramid, matrix version. I recommend you go to photos.greatgatespyramid.com and look at these on a computer monitor and or print them out on a printer of your own, but I think looking at them on a monitor is better. This one you'll find it's a blow up of the area right before you descend into the shaft. It's this area right here. And it's on the wall, and you can get pictures of it. This is a scribble of it. It comes over at a flat line. It goes up, comes back down a little bit lower than it originally started from, comes up gradually and then gets faster, comes up almost to the same level and goes back down, way lower than it did before, and then comes up and it looks like it terminates at the same level it started at. Now, that is right here. And I'm suggesting that it's actually referring, because if you watch the code, everything is relational. That right there relates the pressures in here and the pressures within the spillway, which would be right there. And I'm assuming you've seen my other videos, otherwise you wouldn't have gotten to this one. And I also feel, the way I read it, that if you look at this entrance and you've got that one rock that kind of looks like a tube that's coming from the side, it looks like, and I'd like to get better pictures, that they broke away a little bit. I think that that actually came up to the same level as this rock right here, which is right about here. It's kind of hanging out there that people stand on to take a picture of that. Well, I drew this improperly. It's kind of like up against here, but this is such a large structure that if I put it right there, you kind of can't tell what it is. And this is, because the way I read this is why I feel, well, I'm pretty sure that the oxygen as it's coming out would be under pressure. And this right here shows some of the pressure, how, I'm going to not go into that because this is an area of speculation. I can't prove anything there. What I can prove, or at least suggest heartily, is this right here. This is a picture that you'll find on that link of someone who is standing probably at normal level and took a picture into there. So it's kind of looking down at an angle into there, but you get to see a ridge here and how it gets smaller back there. And you take that and you look at this picture, which is where somebody was probably kneeling or something, was at the same level. Now you can't see it in this gray and black printout, but I kind of redrew it here. As it goes in, as it keeps getting deeper, it keeps getting tighter and tighter. And as I had said in my other videos, this right here is the center point of the Queen's Chamber. I'm going to change that name, but still acceptable. The Queen's Chamber. And what they do is they skew the numbers. They're playing with statistics, and they're kind of like pushing the bell curve by this being the center of the room. There's a 50-50 chance of things happening. But by extending this deeper and being on that side of the room, they're forcing the reaction, or at least heavily suggesting that the reaction occurs in this area. Now, if you look, and this is another reason why I say this was not done by a thief going crazy, it's because these edges are squared back there. They're rough here because you got to look at this as this is condensation. Something sits there, drips of water come down, and look at how it would push the water as it comes down. It would catch those little grooves and would be pushing the water this way. Now, I'm not sure exactly why, but I think they're really looking for the liquid that condensates on this side, because and I say liquid because I feel when everything is going into, its heyday, it's heavy water. So it's wanting it to condensate on this side. And when it does that, it's within visual range, or actually it's since water drops don't have visual, it's within sensory range of the southern shaft. But as that little electron, it may actually have jumped because that's what caused the crack in the northern wall. But as it's coming out of this, kind of like if this was the Haleron collider over there in wherever it is, and it's shooting out of here, it gets to the point where it sees the southern conduit as a more appealing target than the northern conduit, and it takes a beeline for the southern conduit and goes right through that wall and hits the solution behind the conduit and then joins the rest of the pool of solution. Now, what I'm suggesting is how this is a little bit lower than that, just a tiny bit, and this is where only getting the real information, the real solid numbers, will allow me to confirm my suspicions. But the way this gets lower as it pinches it, when we find that that aligns with this, when we find that that aligns with that, it'll help me read this more. But these align with this, and it has to do with the pressures. I feel that this one represents the heavier water, deuterium, or deuterium oxide, if you want to call it that, and this one represents the light water. And we'll also know for sure where the spillway is compared to where these levels are. And I think the actual spillway lines up with this back corridor. You can't see it in this photo because, again, it's looking down. But this back corridor, which is very deep into there, is at a lower level. And I think that would be the water level height. Maybe, actually, if you look at it, I drew it this way. It comes over and then scoops down. This might be the water level height, and it's pinching it off so that the gas is right above that level deep into there. And that is going to be the area where well, it's there, and it's eventually going to condensate. All it's doing is it's skewing the results, so it's kind of making it most appealing for it to be back there. And I feel it's going to cool quickest back there because that's where the water is thinnest. And where the water is thinnest, it's going to cool quicker, hence not retain its heat as well. And when it does that, there's going to be more condensation. And or, depending, and this really depends on what truly is happening in the room. I don't know all the pressures and variables. This is where, when I get it into a CAD file, or I get somebody who's really good with, who looks at how I suggest the system is occurring and says, well, you'll have a force of air here as it condensates and the pressure's there, and really put numbers into it. What a CAD will actually do will help me to understand exactly what's occurring, which then I can help relate it to this. Now, where there's the most communication is in the subterranean chamber. And I printed this out because if you, again, this is on the site, you notice this is the picture in the 1800s. I call these terminals. They are covered. When I saw this, I knew right away that the terminals were not functional. They were communication. When I tried, and after I actually saw the code, I started to look for relationships. And if you look in the subterranean chamber on this side, the left side of this picture, there, if I take it and rotate it, there's a spot where there's a square and it goes down and it does a little step. Now that, where, I'm going to blow this up a bit, okay? This is the, well, if I, at this size, this would be the spot that the water goes over. At the height, that would be the height that the water goes to scoop up. If you look at pictures, again, they're on, follow that link, photos.greatgatespier.com. There are photos looking into there. There are photos looking at it into there at a flat level, looking into it from an angle. But at that height should line up with one of these two. it won't, now, doesn't line up with it like straight across. It lines up with it height-wise. Like if you were to take a yardstick on a 2D plane and look at it, it's going to line up with one of those two spots. The one that's furthest to the back, now this is where it will line up on a plane this way. The one that's furthest to the back should line up with, in the king's chamber, you know how the conduit, if we draw the king's chamber and the antechamber guy there going out, and there's that one thieves hole, thieves tunnel, that's what they like to call it, that has the conduit across the top that joins with the conduit that comes out of here. Okay, you know that one? Now, the subterranean chamber is like right below this, and if I echo the subterranean chamber, which I think is, I guess it is kind of just right below it. So we put that thing in there, and then we put the fins. I guess we'd stick the fin on this side. I think this is deeper than the subterranean chamber. I'm actually going to check that. But if these are the fins, one of those fins is going to line up with this. The other level, actually in this case, it'll line up, like I said, on a plane this way, which would be an up and down plane. That would be your y-axis. That, where it steps up, will tell me exactly where in here. And also, look at the pictures in the thieves' tunnel. There is a ridge on the wall, and there's a dimple in the ground. And I'm going to suggest to you, since you're watching this, that when the, I'm going to call it energized water. I don't have a better term for it yet until somebody tells me. Comes down and falls down into here. It's going to fall down that horizontal shaft that comes into this room. Because of the way that, oh, and there's a tiny, well, I can't say there's a tiny ridge. It looks like that, but there's at least a dimple in the floor and a ridge on the wall. And this is the conduit that connects to it. It's going to condensate in this area of this tunnel, and the driplets are going to go down, and they're going to pool in that little well, that little dimple. And then from there, that puddle will grow and eventually come out and work its way down. But that dimple, and/or that whole section might line up with the fin, or based on where it is and actually the true depth, that fin might line up with here, or wherever that fin breaks, that fin may end right there. I mean, again, it's all relational until I get real numbers. And the numbers in here and the depth of this, these are not numbers that I can find because, well, that was a thieves' tunnel, and hence let's quickly ignore it, even though the conduit in the top is perfectly square and wasn't done by somebody with a pickaxe by mistake. So this is where I'm butting my head. Now the other thing, I kind of drew it here. Let's pretend this is the subterranean chamber now. Okay, going back to the subterranean chamber. And this goes up and out. In here, and if I was going to draw this, technically, the second fin, no, sorry. You got your two fins. That fin, actually, I should do this right. The edge of it lines up with that. I don't think that's a mistake at all. And the depth of it should have, where this tunnel scoots in a little bit, should line up with there. And when I was looking at it, there was one or two other relationships, and they're hitting me hard right now, or they're not hitting me hard right now. But it all, you got to look at relationships, and this is again why real measurements, because I can assume, I can visualize and see things, but unless I can say, look, this lines up with this within like 3 centimeters. This lines up with this within like 2-3 centimeters. You know, that is where it kind of takes the question work out of it. I think it'll line up within 2-3 millimeters, but well, because there might be some wear from time here and some wear there, so it might be centimeters, could even be an inch. But if something lines up with something within an inch, and then something else lines up with something within an inch, and then many things line up with many things within an inch, by knowing what lines up with what, you can actually follow the system, because it tells you. Well, I can't. I sat down and I was trying to follow the system, but there are things where I hit my head. I don't know what it lines up with, or I'm assuming. And this is where I kind of need help with what lines up with what exactly. The bottom of this, which is flat, you can see it's flat, okay, that lines up with, the water. This is the high water line. In fact, that answers my question. This is the high water line, and that lines up with here. So that's the high water line. And then the low water line is, I don't know, it's going to be, so I guess the low water line would actually be this level. And that winds up being the bottom of this. So you got your high water level and your low water level. It's the complete depth of this inner chamber, inner tunnel, with the exception of the way back there, because I think this looks like the water line. But I should have printed out one of the color pictures, one of the newer color pictures of someone looking in. But most of the pictures I have someone standing there smiling, because they're not taking a picture of it because they're trying to take a picture of it. They're taking a picture of it because, look, I'm in Giza, Dad. You know, where there's other things, like Chris Dunn bumped into the conduit out of the King's Chamber, the northern conduit. I believe these numbers are 21 centimeters by whatever it is. And it winds up being the frequency and wavelength, the frequency and the wavelength of hydrogen in a vacuum. And it's the in a vacuum part was the part that really stuck with me, because I have suggested dozens of times that the King's Chamber is actually going to be a vacuum, because the hydrogen and oxygen are oxidizing, burning back together, and that causes a vacuum. And the way the combustion is forcing the reaction across the room, I think they're kind of shooting that hydrogen up, back to here again, and this is same thing it was before. They're shooting that hydrogen out of the King's Chamber through there, and having the ripples and the waves make like a one-way valve, where the gas will be allowed to go through, or in this case water vapor will be allowed to go through, and because there's another little ripple wave coming behind it, it's kind of going to be trapped in there. That's a one-way valve. This whole antechamber deal winds up being also like a stop plug. The water plugs it up, so that allows this to maintain its vacuum, but not too much of a vacuum, but enough vacuum that or enough vacuum that it can suck the air in, but not too much of a vacuum, because it would suck the air in to relieve the pressure. If there was too much, it would suck the air in. If there's not enough, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. So I'm sure I have more, but it is late here. I didn't have to. I answered a couple of other messages, and I did have a prior video about this, but I didn't have these pictures and make some of these realizations. And really, it's looking at it, imagining what's happening in the system, and looking at how, I was going to start pointing out, this groove lines up with this wall. This groove lines up with here, where this one lines up with there. this one, which you kind of can't see, there's a bottle or something sitting there in this picture, it lines up with here. So you got 1, 2, and it's hard to see. In this one, you can see there's another step. I guess that step is this step. The deepest step lines up with there. There's another step that lines up with here. There's another step that lines up with here. This one doesn't have anything that lines up with it. I'm not sure exactly what it's saying, to be honest, until I know exactly the pressures in here. But there is communication. They're trying to, and you see the step here. Again, I go back to this picture. Again, on the same link. This is filled with, I'm going to say gravel, dirt and stuff. And if you look into LERN, low energy nuclear reactions, LENR, or what sometimes referred to as cold fusion, that mythical thing, I believe that some of this gravel in here has nickel or palladium, or there's one other thing. Whatever it is, it would have, those are the 3 things on the elemental periodic table that has what they call a lattice structure. It makes a nice square grid lattice structure, kind of like an ice cube does when you freeze the water, which will allow deuterium elements into it. And well, you can look into what they've been playing with cold fusion, and with everything I believe that was reacting in this room. Remember, water, saturated water, would have worked its way and been in these rocks, kind of saturated in there, and hence there's no reason that deuterium that's in there wouldn't have worked its way into the lattice. It would saturate the rocks. Same way we do today. We build those really cool things, cold fusion chambers, cold fusion reactors that are, a little jug with a couple of copper coils and palladium coils and, things like that. This was performing, I heartily feel this was performing a like thing. So, since I know a low energy nuclear reaction, aka cold fusion, would require a lattice work for that stuff to get into, to bond with, have it forced inside of there. And then I see this picture from eons ago. This is another area where it's functional communication. The bits in here are communication. The rocks in there are functional. It's holding it, and how it's a shaft that goes in, it is a functional communication. It is not just where the rocks here, they're covering it. They weren't doing anything except for covering it. The reaction was happening in the room, and those were just communication. Other areas, I'll point them out since I'm talking about communication. I just thought of one. If you look at the roof above the pit, there are 3 squares that sit a little bit apart from each other. If you look at the king's chamber along the wall, there are 3 squares that sit connected. The proportion between those squares and the larger square on the fin, this is the subterranean chamber now again, that sits there next to the 2 fins. I think in the subterranean chamber they're telling us they're separating the hydrogen and oxygen. They're not. They're telling you the reaction is occurring, and you know what I just thought of? Exactly where the depth is, comparing that depth from the ceiling, and again I don't have the exact number, I just can see it in the pictures, to the location of the granite rock in here, comparing that to one of them. And if you were to take the granite rock that's in the subterranean chamber, just look straight up, comparing that to one of them. it may just say this is where we break it. That this room is the epicenter of breaking it. Although the reaction happens in the subterranean section, the communication is within this room. And in the King's chamber, where I'm suggesting they combust it back together, which, ironically enough, the reaction starts within the I call it the mixing rock. They always call it or churning rock. They like to call it the sarcophagus, where that is sitting right here in the middle of the room. This is against the wall, is where I suggest the reaction starts for rejoining it back together. And there's, I feel, communication on the wall that is supporting my suggestion. Breaks in the basement, joins up here. Well, there's more, but again, it's late, and I don't have my thinking cap on. So I'd love to hear your feedback on what I'm saying. Maybe you've noticed some things I haven't. There's lots of stuff in here to notice, and as I get more information on exactly how high these shafts go in relation to things, it's all relational. So for that part, I need exact numbers. For the system, it just like Carl Munck said, as far as things being scaled, this can almost be, well, it can't really be scaled. I'll let you in on a little bit. The grotto, the way it hangs the water from the grotto, I believe as this water goes down, as soon as it gets to the 32-foot mark where it's hanging it, 32 feet of water, 32 feet. Soon as it's hanging it from the grotto 32 feet, you're going to get to where the water gets to the point where it is now in like as much of a vacuum as it can handle. And it is going to, I don't know exactly what it's going to do. Physics and or CAD and or a model will show us, but it's going to put stress on the water, and I think it's going to break, cavitate. It's going to do something, because when that occurs, the water is not, it's going to do something, and it's going to break at the weakest bond, and I think that might be another additional, because of all that vacuum pressure, maybe another catalyst for the water breaking out off the rock in the grotto. And when I say breaking off the rock, I mean the rock is like a doorknob, and the water is either getting energized or de-energized, one way or the other. It's doing something. And when it flows over and touches the granite rock, and it shorts to the granite rock, it is either going to release its energy or pick up its energy. And the way there's a pool behind it that the rock is touching against, if this pool is energy A, and the water that's being suspended is energy B, whatever they are, when that little water droplet touches here, it's either it is going to grab energy and be broken into gases, or it's going to release energy to it, which will then make this water, as it touches it, acquire energy, and it's going to be broken. But somewhere, some water droplet somewhere has got to give, and it's the weakest link that breaks first. And a heavy-duty physics calculation and or a nice CAD program will tell us which link is the weakest link, and I still have to say that Mr. Cadman suggests that there may be salt here. He actually suggests there may be salt in the pit in the subterranean chamber. I am not opposed to the idea of salt, other than if there was salt in here, then we would have found salt above the King's chamber in the relieving rooms, because of the hydrogen gas upflow. It would have not just taken bugs and shells and things that were light enough to go up with the upflow. It would have also taken little salt. So I think the salt was maintained within the system to keep the same way you put little drips of salt into your humidifier, your vaporizer, humidifier, you put like just a little bit of salt in there to get the reaction going, because they put a lot of salt. They weren't worried about sparks and things shorting. In fact, sparks and things shorting is kind of what they were going for. But again, let me know what you think. Have a nice day. Please drive through.